Hello, everyone. Welcome to our new show, which is called True Horror, where we discuss real cases, real mysteries, unsolved mysteries, and we'll try to provide our own theories about what may have happened in each of those cases. Myself, Mehul, and my co-presenter for this case today is Nikhil.
Hi guys, welcome to our channel.
So today we are going to go all the way over to Canada to discuss the case of nurse Cindy James. And this is one of the cases that has haunted me for a long, long time. read about this case many, many years ago. And ever since then, it's always sort of stayed with me after that. And I think you will understand why after you listen to this case today. So the episode name is They Won't Believe You Until You're Dead. So the setting is Richmond, British Columbia, which is in Canada, basically Canada, in 1989, where a body was found lying in the yard of an abandoned house. And the victim was a 44-year-old nurse called Cindy James. She was drugged and strangled, and both her hands and feet were tied behind her back. And the odd thing is, they eventually ruled that this was actually an accident or a suicide, which seems really weird. And after you read the entire case, you'll find it even more strange, to be perfectly honest. So we'll start from the beginning. She was initially born in 1944 as Cynthia Elizabeth Hack, and her father was Otto, and he basically worked in the Air Force with Canada, and her mother Tilly was a housewife, and she had five siblings, three older brothers and two younger sisters, and her parents were actually of Russian descent. So her early life was basically her. There was nothing particularly unusual that is noted in her early life. But her father was apparently quite strict and believed in corporal punishment. She was eventually enrolled in nursing school in 1962. Well, and because of her father's work with the Air Force, the rest of the family used to move around a lot. And when she was in nursing school, they actually were relocated to France. And there was an unusual incident which occurred when she did go to nursing school. Apparently, she got engaged to one of the interns there. This was She told this to her family afterwards when she eventually went to meet them in France, and she never told them the name of this particular individual. But unfortunately, what happened was that this particular fellow, he discovered that he had terminal cancer, and he committed suicide while the couple were going on a skiing trip. So this is so we'll stop there initially. So Nikhil, when you are listening to that particular story, does that sound uh, unusual or particularly significant to you?
Yeah, it sounds super strange to me, to be honest. Like she meets some strange intern in France. Nobody knows anything about that dude, and all of a sudden he discovers that he has terminal cancer and he kills himself while they're on a skiing trip. The whole thing just seems odd to me. Just doesn't add up. Nobody has even seen this dude, so
Yeah, I think the
major red flags. Yeah.
once you read her whole story, the story s- make, can be interpreted in two ways.
Yeah.
One is that she had this particular trauma early in her life, and perhaps that always kind of stayed with her later on also. The second possible theory could be that this story isn't actually true. I'm not sure.
And I would like to add one more thing. Like, is there like someone who's seen this guy in
No,
real? Nobody
no,
has seen him. Like
no.
even like when he committed suicide, no one has even seen his dead body.
No, this was apparently everything. This entire story was told after the fact when she went to France. So
Hmm.
nobody actually met him while he was alive, at least his
And
family, and he nobody
no
actually.
known family as well.
She has not even named him. She has not, so we have no idea who he is.
Hmm, weird.
So the second possibility is that she didn't actually this didn't actually happen, and she made up the story for some particular reason or another,
Hmm.
which again would be strange. Why would you just make something like that up? But we'll get more into that later on. So going back, so next thing is she met a person called Roy Makepeace in 1965. He was a psychiatrist. He was from South Africa, and this guy was 18 years older than her, and they fell in love and they got married. And obviously, her parents were quite skeptical of this marriage because, let's face it, 18 years is a very large age gap for any kind of relationship, and whenever the gap in age is that large, there's always a risk that the older person is going to be the more domineering person in the relationship, and may not turn out to be that healthy. So n- it's a kind of a red flag. So not saying that not trying to uh, say anything completely bad about right away, but it definitely sounds like something of a red flag here. What do you say, man?
Not specifically as far as I'm concerned. Like 18 is a bit too much of an age difference, but still at the same time, maybe she was into older dudes. I don't know. Maybe that was her taste.
Uh,
Maybe he had like a stable job and he could take good care of her. Never know what the situation were back then. So I mean, like it's not
But
that much
you
of a red
see,
flag.
she was, I think she was around what, 21
You
when she
see,
met him, and he must have been 37. So if she was, if it was like she was 27 and he was like 40 or something, it would have been still little bit better. But
yeah, but
21,
yeah, but then again, like back in the days, like during like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, this was pretty much like a common practice. Like so, I don't see any red flags as far as I'm concerned. But was this dude married before, or was it like his first marriage?
no, no, he was married before he got divorced and had
Hmm.
2 children as well before this, which he left to be with Cindy.
Hmm. Interesting. It doesn't seem like a red flag to me. Maybe she found something in him, or who knows.
So anyway, it wasn't the ideal marriage as such. The two were said to be a little bit emotionally distant. Later on, after it ended, Cindy would make claims of spousal abuse and make peace claim that he only slapped her twice during the entire marriage, as if that is some kind of commendable achievement. So coming to her work life, she worked at a pediatric nurse in Vancouver General Hospital until 1975 after she graduated. From 75 onward, she was actually working in a facility which cared for children with behavioral disorders, where she was noted there for her professionalism and competence by her colleagues. But unfortunately, as you'll find out well, later on, she would eventually get fired from this job. So the big turning point in Cindy's life actually came in 1982 in July, when she actually divorced Makepeace. So the divorce at the time was said to be quite amicable, but after it ended, the marriage ended in July. In From October, she began to receive very odd phone calls, and some of these phone calls would be just silence. The other person wouldn't say anything. Sometimes they'll be whispering, and sometimes they would make some very very lewd statements. So as time when progressed, the incidents escalated. So So she reported that somebody threw rocks through her window, smashed her post lights, and even broke into her house and slashed her pillow. So I'm not really sure why slashing her pillow was is supposed to mean. So it seems very odd that somebody would break into someone's house to slash a pillow. So that is a little odd. Actually, you would get messages like this. So they're like words cut out of magazines or something, and paste it together to send a message. So this is an example of the one of the messages that she received, and she also found out that somebody had actually cut her telephone line. So this would be very scary for anyone. First of all, you're getting these strange phone calls, and then afterwards, we find out that somebody has broken into your house, somebody has gone into your bedroom, slashed your pillow, and then you receive this message. Then you find out that your telephone lines have actually been slashed. So it's very, very a frightening experience for anyone. So she contacted the police, and we have uh, uh, another peripheral character in the story, which is an officer called Patrick McBride. So initially, he came to investigate this case, and he ended up getting involved in a relationship with Cindy, and we even moved in with her after a few months in November. So he apparently had some suspicions about the husband, and he didn't really have a very good opinion about him. The relationship between Cindy and this guy was not actually didn't actually last too long, because apparently he wanted to get married. She wasn't really ready at that point of time, and then eventually they did break up. B- uh, the, McBride reported that once, after all of these weird incidents started, he saw Makepeace in the alley behind her house with two guns. So Canada, USA, Canada. So people run around with guns more often than you will see in India. But
Not
again,
in
this was
Canada. Canada is much safer when you compare it to the US. At least
so I
that's what they
guess
say. At least that's what they say on paper. I'm not too sure.
so. Either way, this is a bit unusual. So to be just roaming around the area behind your ex-wife's house with two guns. So that's definitely odd. So she claimed to be doing this for Cindy's safety. And McBride's involvement in this particular case ended at this point. So he was not involved beyond 1982, early 83. But you will hear about him later on. What happened was that, unrelated to this incident, or might be related also. 4 years after Cindy died, McBride was actually arrested for sexual assault of two women.
Wow.
And apparently, he said that one of the women reminded him of Cindy, which is kind of gross.
Hmm.
So I'm really not sure how to fit that him in this particular story, but he has some very suspicious history, at least after the fact. So that was 1982. So now coming to 1983, so initially they started with phone calls, then the somebody broke in, slashed a pillow. Now it was turning physical. So we have Agnes Woodcock. Agnes Woodcock is one of the close friends of Cindy. So in January of 1983, came to Cindy's residence, and she found that she had been attacked with a sharp object, and a black nylon stocking was tied tightly around her neck. And this is something that you should keep in mind, because when we look at the subsequent attacks as well, this particular pattern seems to be repeating itself. he and this was one of the messages that Cindy was sent. So you can see them very disturbing imagery that has been shown here. So this was obviously reported to the police, but problem was that she actually failed to polygraph test while being questioned about this particular incident. She admitted that she had recognized one of the attacker, but she had refused to name them because she said that the attackers threatened to go after her family, her mother, her sister, if she never revealed who they were. So that was her justification for not revealing, giving more information to the police. But what but from the police point of view, what they felt was that this lady, she was reporting an incident about being assaulted, but she was still not being completely honest about what had happened. So, and she had failed two polygraph tests, and polygraph tests are obviously, they're not hard and fast or anything, so they have it has its own problems. But Cindy never gave. You can see even here and even in the incidents afterwards that Cindy is not a very reliable narrator. So we say, should we say? So coming to October of '83, so this will slowly get more and more disturbing as we go on. So she found three dead cats hanging from the trees in her in her yard, and one of them had a note tied to it that read, "You're next." So this is extremely disturbing. So Nikhil, what do you think about what is happening right now from the story that we have? Then this has been going on for around 2 years now.
Yeah, I mean, like it's some extremely disturbing stuff which has been happening in our life, especially like that bit with like the three dead cats hanging in the tree. That's like extremely disturbing for anyone to like find something like that in their backyard. And also like with the attack in the garage and all that, and also the fact that the police has done like a polygraph test with her and she has failed that test. So it's like really hard to like put everything together with like the facts which are being presented. So either she's making this all up or there is like some crazy psychopath who's after her. It's like it's really
But
disturbing and odd, this whole thing.
either way, it's kind of frightening, and it's also kind little bit odd that these incidents seem to be happening over such a prolonged period of time. So whether it be that she is faking some of the incidents, or whether it is actually real, either way, that nobody else has been able to conclusively prove it either way, or that neither Sydney got caught nor the supposed perpetrator got caught. It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
Again, it's strange that somebody will try to harass someone over such a prolonged period of time in such an odd way. But if it did happen, then it is seriously cruel.
Yeah. And also, like, is there like any history with Cindy doing drugs or anything like that? Does she have like a history of drug violence? She
No.
could have been hallucinating.
She, there is no documentation of her being a drug addict per se, but
Mm.
it is possible because she is working in hospitals, and she may have had access
Yeah.
to medications, and it
Mm.
could have been easy for her to take something.
Yeah. And also,
But
like with her failed relationships and all that, maybe she felt that she needed to, blow some steam or like, get her mind off things. And maybe she stole something from her place of work.
it is possible.
Yeah,
But
just a possibility. Yeah.
it's speculation at this point, and there was no documented evidence that something like that actually happened. But we'll
Mm.
come more to that later on.
Okay.
Now, at this point, she hired a private investigator called Ossie Caban. So he will also play an important role in the story in the coming year. So what he did was the telephone lines were cut, as you may remember. So he gave her a two-way radio, so they could be in constant contact in case something went wrong. And this turned out to be useful because in January of 1984, so he heard some commotion over this radio, and he ran to a residence. And what he found was that he found her lying unconscious on the floor with a black nylon stocking tied around her neck, which, if you remember, was exactly how one of the previous attacks was like. And a note was actually stabbed through the back of her hand with a knife, and it read, "Now you must die." And I'm not going to read the last words here, but this is perhaps one of the most disturbing things in this entire story. So this sounds absolutely awful. So what she told Kaban later on was that she noticed someone coming through the gate, and she was apparently hit on the side of the head with a piece of wood or something. And then she remembered being held down and a needle going through her arm or something. But again, this is a very this is the problem with most of our account, because it's really difficult to figure out what happened from her recollection of the events. So apparently she got hit on the head, and she doesn't remember much, and possibly she was also drugged. And this is the facial composites of Cindy's apparent assailant in this particular incident, and this is surely something that is going to give you nightmares. So the problem with this particular story was that there was once the police investigated, they actually found that there were no signs of forced entry as such. And though there was a needle mark on Cindy's arm, there was no substances that they could find in her system on evaluation. So then they tried. Then the police also had a good look at Makepeace at this point, and uh, because Cindy had started to tell them that Makepeace was violent towards her on several occasions during their marriage. And the attacks continued after this. In July of the same year, she was attacked again. Once again, she had needle marks on her arm, and this same black nylon stocking was tied around her neck once again. So the police were becoming more and more alarmed as the incidents began to escalate. So they tapped Cindy's phone, and they stationed police officers to monitor her house, as well as the house of Makepeace, as well as two other unnamed suspects. And uh, they monitored all of these places for several months, and they found nothing. So when the police were closely monitoring these places, they found absolutely nothing. And they spent a lot of resources on this investigation. They spent about $1 million dollars on the investigation by this point, but they didn't find anything conclusive. So coming to 1985, then that is when Sydney tried hypnotherapy, and apparently she found some hidden memories that she had completely forgotten about. That in 1981, she went on a trip with her with Makepeace, her ex husband, and apparently he had uh, aided in the murder of a couple, and it was a very brutal murder. And apparently, after witnessing this, Sydney completely blocked out this memory until she had underwent hypnotherapy in 1985. And but the problem was that her sister Melanie was also on this trip, and she definitely does not remember anything like this happening. And the police definitely they did try to investigate this particular incident, but they really didn't find any conclusive evidence that anything like this actually happened. The attacks were continuing to happen. So in December of 85, Sydney, she woke up in a ditch of several miles from her house, again with the needle marks, again with the stalking around the neck, which had become a signature of the attacks against her. And at this point, Woodcock, who was her friend, and Woodcock's husband Tom, they decided to start staying with James in the hopes that the harassment would stop once they would be with her. So I think we'll stop here. So Nikhil, what do you think about the hypnotherapy?
Before the hypnotherapy, I have like a few questions. Like, I find it odd that, like police, they were literally surveilling her for like what, for 6 months, and they found nothing. And the moment they stopped their surveillance, the attack started happening again. And also these nylon stockings, which is believed to be like found tied around the neck. Like, is it possible for you to do it by yourself? Is that something which is possible? Like the way it was tied around the neck? Could a person actually do that to themselves?
I think it's definitely possible that she could have done that, but uh, her eventual death and all the way she was tied in that particular day, that is a little bit hard to believe. But I think the nylon stocking is definitely something that it's not beyond imagination that she could have done that to herself. So
And
that's
also,
definitely,
which brings us back to the hypnotherapy thing, where she recalls her husband murdering like a couple. But upon investigation, like no missing person were found. They found no bodies. So maybe it's like a repressed memory which had something to do with some other form of trauma. Because all this stuff started happening after her divorce with her husband, right? So maybe there was like some sort of trauma involved in their relationship, and maybe, like the human mind, it works in weird ways, right? Maybe she
yeah.
tried blocking it out. Maybe that's something to do with like some sort of mental disorder.
It's possible. It's possible that because the, once all of these revelations started coming out, there was a lot of accusation from both sides. Of her parents blamed Makepeace blamed her parents. He was like, her father was abusive to her during childhood. The parents were like, Makepeace was abusive to her during her marriage. So definitely, it is quite likely that she did probably face some kind of abuse at some point or another, and maybe she was trying to suppress that particular memory, perhaps not well. And this was just a one way of her trying to deal with that. Perhaps all of these incidents were just her way of trying to uh, cope with the other forms of abuse that she had faced in her life. Another thing that the good point that you made was about the relationship between the police surveillance and the occurrence of the attack. So there was a stereotypical pattern where the as soon as the police surveillance used to end, the attacks used to start again. So the thing about that is that it could definitely be because the she was staging the incidents. The alternative possibility is that the police weren't particularly subtle about the surveillance that they were providing, and the perpetrator or perpetrators, and Sydney would claim that there were around up to three of them who are doing this. So they they would get to know very easily that the police are actually surveilling them. So that could be why no attacks occurred during the few months of police surveillance. But again, that it is a very debatable topic. That
Hmm. I mean, she did like show some signs of trauma. So I guess trauma is like a plausible theory, I guess. Maybe she suffered some sort of trauma, as you mentioned, at some point in her life, and it's just her way of like maybe calling out for help, or just her way of coping. I mean,
But
that's like one theory where I'm like really moving with. So
but the flip side is that some of the attacks are particularly brutal. So the one where she had a knife that was stabbed into her arm and which had a message through it as well.
I mean, like
And
with trauma, like there has been like incidences of self harm, right? So what if it wa-
self
it
self
was
harm definitely occurs, but
so what if
this
it
is
was like
particular.
an incident like that, like where she was like trying to harm herself?
It could be, but this is a particularly brutal way of harming yourself. If you're completely stabbing through your hand, then that is definitely a very brutal way of doing it.
Hmm.
So, which is the another unusual part of this case.
Yeah, but then again, though, like if you're not in like a right state of mind, you'd be like shocked or surprised as to like what you can do to yourself or to like other people. So maybe it had something to do with that, or maybe because of like all the traumas that she suffered in her life, maybe she developed like multiple personality disorder or something like that, and her other personality took over, and that made her do it. I mean, the
So,
reasons could be plenty. Yeah.
I think we'll discuss more during the theory discussion phase.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the rest of the story, the rest of the case here. So, so now the Woodcocks are staying with Sydney, and during April of '86, actually, the basement of her home got on fire. So on in April 86, Cindy ran into the Woodcock bedroom and said she had heard a noise, and it had come from the basement. And when they went to see what was happening, they found that it was on fire. And this is perhaps the one incident which is very suspicious for being staged by Cindy herself, because for one thing, there was no evidence that somebody has broken into that basement. So there was no fingerprints on the outside of the windowsill of the basement. So it really didn't look like anybody had actually went into the basement from outside. But so which means that the fire was definitely set by somebody inside the house. So which means that it was either Cindy or the Woodcocks. And another suspicious thing is that at this particular time, Cindy was walking her dog at 3 a.m. before this happened, which is again extremely unusual, because if you are being stalked and you know that unknown people are trying to harm you, and they can attack you at any time, why would you try to walk your dog at 3 a.m. at night? It is extremely unusual, and that is why police believed that Sydney had set this fire by herself. So after this incident, actually, Sydney got admitted to a psychiatric facility where she was diagnosed with anorexia and depression. Whether their attacks were staged or actually really, there was absolutely no question that Sydney was actually her world was actually collapsing around her, and she was not in a very good place at all. And so two psychiatrists have actually determined that she had been staging some of these attacks during her psychotic break. So you can see the difference. We saw her photo, one of her photos earlier before the attacks began, and you can see how she is now, and she's clearly looks like somebody who is suffering in life. So, and unfortunately, her life was getting even more and more worse during this time, because she was fired from her job. Obviously, her co-workers felt that she was not, with all of this stuff happening to her, it was not good for her to continue where she was working. She changed her last name from Makepeace back to James, and she moved into a different route. Apparently to make the attack stop. So she changed her last name, changed to a new house, tried to get to another safe place, possibly. So she while she was seeing a therapist, apparently her mental health began to improve, and for about a year she didn't actually report any incidents as such. But sadly for her, the attacks would come back again. So in '88, Makepeace actually received a phone call. So which I actually have the audio here. So Nikhil, what do you think of that audio?
And could be Cindy herself
So
who
does
sent
it
the audio.
does that sound like a man's voice, or does that sound like a woman's voice?
So, sounds like a man's voice, I guess.
I'm not sure. I think
You can easily mimic like voices, right? But
I'm
I'm
not
pretty
really
sure that
sure.
I mean, like judging from like what happened, like with her being like admitted to like a psychiatric facility and all that, everything like points towards her having like some sort of mental issues. And I'm pretty sure she had like multiple personality disorder where like one personality would take over the other. I mean, like everything up to now pretty much suggests that if you think about it.
Uh,
And
I'm not. I think it's possible that she was having some kind of psychotic episode, multiple personalities. I'm not really sure, because I think if she actually had multiple personality disorder, or dissociative personality disorder, as it is called now, that generally people who have that face some kind of severe trauma during childhood, and the multiple personalities begin in childhood. So
mm,
those around her would have known about it by now. Her parents and her husband. Her husband was actually a psychiatrist, so
mm,
being married with her for about 16 years or so, he must have you know, found out some multiple personalities by then. It's not possible for her to be having that kind of disorder and being simultaneously being able to hide them. So definitely some kind of mental health issues going on, but probably not multiple personalities per se.
and also
But,
like
but
it's weird that like nobody has actually looked into like the possibility of her doing drugs. So I mean, it's like pretty obvious that she had like some sort of like psychotic issue going on with her life, as you mentioned. And also like with all the evidence that we went through, like it seems highly plausible that she had like some sort of like psychotic episodes. But on top of that, like was she actually taking drugs? Like, that is just something which like nobody has looked into. And like I mean, obviously she was in a psychiatric facility. Like what sort of drugs were they giving to her, and did this have like an impact later on, like let's say like after a year down the line?
definitely that it is a possibility. And another thing that uh, we'd like to mention here, that the basement fire incident is definitely it almost 90% it's probably Cindy herself who
Cindy,
did
yeah.
that.
And also
The,
like walking your dog at 3 a.m. at night, that seems highly suspicious. And especially
the
as you mentioned, like her life was under threat. She had like alleged guy stalking her, and she's walking her dog at 3 a.m. and all of a sudden her house catches fire. Highly suspicious. And also the guy who was staying with Cindy, he did mention like seeing like a suspicious guy outside the house who supposedly ran away. That could be a
Yeah, with
coincidence,
the
but
husband Woodcock.
yeah,
The Agnes's husband Woodcock. So
yeah.
he mentioned somebody, but that apparently during the fire he went out and met one guy standing on the street, who he asked this guy for help, and this guy just ran. So
Hmm.
you can interpret that as unusual or suspicious, or you can also interpret that the guy just didn't want to get involved. in that
Or
in
yeah, I mean, like maybe he just saw a house on fire and he just got curious as to what was happening, and this guy approached him, and maybe he just got freaked out all of a sudden, and he just didn't want to be involved in all this. Yeah,
that is definitely a possibility. That is definitely a possibility.
mm,
But the other theory that I've heard is that the woodcocks are somehow involved in this as well. And to a certain degree, would admit that it is kind of unusual how much they have involved themselves in this particular
mm,
issue. Maybe,
mm,
but it could be that they were just trying to be nice people, trying to help Cindy, and um, but the flip side is that kind of they are been actually involved in multiple of these incidents.
mm. Yeah, they're definitely like a common factor in this like whole incident. Like, yeah, Woodcock, they're like a common denominator in all this. So it could be a possibility. Like, were there like further investigation or something into them, like the
There
Woodcock
was an
family?
I don't think there was any evidence to suggest that they were actually doing anything unusual, and
Mm.
not, there was no suggestion as such. I've only read about something like this from internet theories. So there's no
Was there
actually
like anything funny happening between Cindy and the guy, Tony Woodcock, I believe his name was? Was there anything funny happening?
no. There was no suggestion that something like that was going on.
Hmm, interesting.
So we'll finish the story. So remember that we started in 1982, and now we have come to 19. We're coming to 1988 and 89. So it's been a long, long, long time. So all these attacks have been occurring for a long time. It is not even imaginable. And it is to imagine just how much this lady must have been suffering in this time. So in 88, October 88, so again, there was a good around period of about a year or so where there were no attacks. Then in October 88, sometime after Makepeace got that phone call, Cindy was again found unconscious in her car, naked from waist down, hog-tied, and again with the nylon stocking around her neck. Again, Cindy claimed that her ex-husband was somehow behind the attacks, but he was not even in the country when one of them took place. So it is not possible for him to be responsible for all of these attacks. But again, it is extremely unusual for somebody uh, to to uh, arrange this kind of incident, that she herself is naked from the waist down, she is hog-tied. So it is very, very unusual that some person could have done this to themselves. Then finally coming to 1989, May 25, Cindy disappeared. So she had deposited her paycheck, went to a beauty salon, bought groceries, and apparently she disappeared after that. She was supposed to show up for a card game with Agnes that night, but she didn't show up. And eventually, they found her car at the shopping mall parking lot, and they had found some blood on the driver's side door. But Cindy was nowhere to be found. And one of the unusual part about this particular incident was that the Woodcocks actually found the car before the police. So that was a kind of an odd coincidence. Eventually, 2 weeks later, they found the body in the yard of an abandoned house, and this is quite unusual because apparently this was roadside, and apparently in the 2 weeks nobody has actually noticed the body until then. And again, what was noticed was that she was again hog-tied, and a cord was wrapped around one ankle and a wrist. The person who had found the body claimed that this was definitely not suicide. The autopsy was done. She had multiple intoxications, significant amounts of morphine, diazepam, and flurazepam. And it was possibly anywhere from 20 to 80 tablets of flurazepam was there.
Mm.
And she had 10 times the lethal dose of morphine in her system, but it was not sure whether it was morphine tablets or morphine injection that occurred. Uh, but again, this is pointing like this particular aspect is pointing slightly more towards the suicide than a murder, because to murder someone by giving 80 tablets is extremely unusual. That is favoring more of a suicide. But again, the way she was hog-tied, again, that is kind of unusual for a suicide. And the coroner's inquest, eventually they were not really able to figure out what happened either. So in 1990, it was ultimately ruled that the Cindy died of an unknown event, and the case was formally closed. So they were basically unable to decide whether this was a suicide, homicide, or accidental. So
Hmm.
the theories about this case are basically: number one, Cindy was actually stalked for several years, and eventually she was murdered by the person uh, who was behind the all of the attacks, the person or persons. Theory number two is that Cindy faked all of the encounters which occurred. There was no stalkers as such, and eventually she took her own life, unfortunately. Another theory is that Cindy faked most of her attacks, but her ultimate death was at the hands of a random serial killer. So whatever it may be, the case, even after so many years, it is still unsolved, and we both our parents have died, unfortunately, without any getting any clear answers. And I don't think we'll we are any closer to finding out what actually happened to Cindy James. So, Nikhil, so now that we have completed the entire story, so what are your thoughts about this case, and what do you think likely happened?
Yeah, theory three, which you mentioned, seems highly likely. Um, I mean, like, also like going back to like the beginning of the story when she was like in a brief relationship with the detective. I mean, the detective, he pretty much knew like everything which was happening with her, right? And also like the attack which happened before her disappearance, like she was practically naked from her waist down. And then like 4 years later, this guy becomes like he gets jailed for like sexual assault on like some other woman, right? I mean, like when you
Yes.
add all these together, I mean, that guy seems pretty shady. It could have been him because he obviously knew like what was happening with Cindy, and maybe he started getting like these urges. Maybe he wanted to act out on his urges. So I mean, like it could have been him. It could have been him.
It's
And
possible.
also, yeah, and also I don't believe that her death was staged because obviously she had like a lot of drugs in her system. I mean, like, is it like even possible for a person to like take the amount of drugs that were found in her system and like basically tie herself behind her back? Like, how does that even happen? Like, is it like humanly possible to do something like that?
What they did during the investigation was that they brought in a not expert who's claimed that you can actually do tie yourself up like that, but he was a not expert. I'm not sure how common people could
Mm.
do that to themselves.
But
Certainly, but
yeah, but then again, though, what about the drugs which were found in her system? Like, could she be
well,
like lucid? Could she have been like lucid enough to actually do that
Well,
to
if
herself?
if we had taken oral tablets, which is this is basically unknown about the case, whether it was oral, because flurazepam is definitely oral, but whether it morphine was given IV or in the tablet form, if it is given in a tablet form, definitely it takes a little while before the action comes on. So it is possible that she could have tied herself up if she had taken the tablets.
And is there like no way to like find out like exactly how the drugs were taken, like during autopsy? Like whether it was like by injection or whether it was like taken orally by tablets? Like is it not possible to figure that out when you actually conduct an autopsy?
Uh,
I'm no medical expert, so I don't know. Like it should be possible, right?
it should be possible, but we don't know what kind of autopsy was done in this particular case. It was also done so many years back, so we cannot compare it to the autopsies that we do now.
Mm.
So there is
And
that.
also like the state that her body was found in, she was like practically punched, right? So if her hands were like tied behind her back, how could she punch herself in the face? Or let's say hypothetically she punched herself in the face and then proceeded to die. I mean, like none of this adds up.
Yes, that is a unusual. But one thing I would say is that if giving tablets forcibly seems like a very uh, weird way to kill someone. So
Well, if she was like killed by like a sadistic psychopath or like a serial killer, as you suggested, like serial killers are known to do like weird stuff. So what if that was like some sort of like weird fantasy for whoever this guy or
yeah, but I've never actually read it, the MO of any serial killer forcing someone to take multiple
mm,
medications like this. But it's much more common that people commit suicide by taking multiple drugs than being forcibly fed like that. But
or it could have been someone who had like extreme anger towards this person. It could have
uh,
been the ex-husband as well, since there were drugs involved, because he worked as a psychiatrist, right? So it would have been like super easy for him to have obtained these drugs.
possible. The two main shady characters in the story are definitely Makepeace and the
Boyfriend,
McBride.
the detective, yeah, the detective
Yeah,
boyfriend, yeah.
so well, they
They're
are
super
definitely
shady, these two, yeah.
shady people. There's nothing conclusive that anybody has been ever able to find about them. But and one would imagine that if either of them were actually involved, it would have been difficult for them to get away with it for 7 years. So, but the thing is that it is still possible that even if Cindy was staging most of the time, that the final death might have been a murder.
Yeah,
By
100%. The final that might have been a murder, because obviously it definitely has something to do with someone who knew what was happening with Cindy. Because I mean, I mean, like that's pretty much like what it all points to, like her final death. Because obviously they knew like she had like some sort of psychotic issues, and it is definitely someone or a group of people who took advantage of it to finally kill her. That's what I believe, at least. But and also like the her Woodcock family, like how they managed to find her car, like how did they even manage to find that car? Because obviously
Yeah,
she was missing,
that's
right? Yeah,
again the
yeah,
the
that's
woodcocks
suspicious.
are like the complete unknown.
Yeah,
The so it's like you like to think of them as good people, and if you read the story, you'll
yeah,
think like they're good people only. But when you think about it, it's kind of something fishy there,
yeah.
maybe.
It's also super odd that like even through like all these psychotic issues and whatever issues that Cindy was going through, they were always like the goody good guys. Like people can't be that much good in my opinion unless they have like some sort of ulterior motive. I mean, they're pretty shady as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure of
And
any friends who would actually move in with me if I was going through a psychotic break.
yeah,
So,
exactly,
so,
exactly. Like no matter like how close you are with a friend, yeah, it have to be like yeah,
so,
extreme.
and that to
Yeah,
a married
yeah,
couple. So
yeah,
that's a kind of maybe
yeah.
I'm not ruling it out, man, but it's kind of
And
there's
also like
something
did the
there.
wood I mean also the woodcock, like did they have like some sort of like relationship, like friendship or like some other form of like relationship with the detective or with like her ex-husband, like
I don't think anything is mentioned as such. The detective was not on good terms with Makepeace. That much we do know because he used to think that he Makepeace was suspicious.
hmm. And also I want to ask one more thing, like was there like any sign of like sexual assault on her, like when she died, Cindy
No,
James? There was nothing,
no.
right? Okay.
She actually one of the attacks. I think it was in the '84 attack. That the one where she said she was hit on the head and she couldn't remember anything.
Hmm.
She claimed that she might have been sexually assaulted, but during the examination they didn't actually find any evidence of
Hmm.
sexual assault. It might have been because she doesn't remember anything. She said it could have been.
Hmm.
So, but none of the, but there were some of the threats via the phone did have a sexual nature to them.
Hmm. I mean, like, the three possible suspects, definitely number one on my list is the detective. Because, like, 4 years later, he actually went on to sexual assault a few women. Maybe this was like, maybe the death of maybe like the murder of Cindy James was actually the trigger which eventually led him down that path. Who knows? And also her ex-husband, definitely. And also the woodcock, like, something about them seems pretty off, if you ask me.
Well, whatever it is, I think we can all agree that the life of Cindy James is a tragedy, and a tragedy that like no other.
Hmm.
This is why the story is always stuck with me. That is a real tragedy by how this lady had her entire life ruined
Hmm.
from 1988 82 onwards, and it was a literal living nightmare for her after this time.
Also,
So
there is one more theory that I would like to suggest, that French boyfriend who was with her, like, during her stay in France. Like, what if it wasn't a suicide? What if, like, something nasty happened to her back in France and this guy managed to track her down in Canada, and, one thing led to another, and he started, like, extensively stalking her. It's like with most
uh,
stalking cases, like, who would wait for like 6 years before, like, killing someone or like kidnapping someone? They would they would move in as soon as possible, right? With like normal stalking cases. So I mean that could be a possibility as well.
yeah, the
Yeah.
boyfriend story is a very unusual thing. I'm not
Hmm.
really sure what to make of that, to be honest.
Hmm.
But if what your that particular theory is like something out of a movie. So somebody waiting for 16 years to resurface. So I'm
I don't
not
know,
sure
man.
what.
People, they're
I'm not even
strange,
sure
man. Yeah.
he existed. To be perfectly honest with you.
Hmm.
But so that is another thing. So you could say that that was an evidence that even back in the day, Cindy had a habit of making things up.
Hmm.
So that is another way of looking at that particular story.
Hmm.
So I think they can call it a day with this particular story. I think we covered all of the aspects that we wanted to cover in this story, and we will definitely try to bring you more stories of this ilk. We'll more mysteries, and we'll try to give more of our opinions on such cases. So
Yep.
thank you so much for.
Hope you guys enjoyed the first episode of True Horror. We'll be back with more. See you.
So thank you
And
so much everyone for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Be part of our channel or whatever the YouTube terminology is. Like, share, and subscribe. Yeah, that is it.
Yes.
All right. Signing out. Bye.
Bye.